It's Halloween month, and what a good way to start the month by reviewing a Goosebumps game. And that Goosebumps game is Goosebumps Terror in Little Creek. Now, this game actually was developed by Game Mill Entertainment, which you guys have seen in my channel recently. I've done reviews on the Rudolph game that they also made, and also the recent Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny game. But I figured this time we're going to talk about a Goosebumps game that they actually decided to make. And honestly, I was actually really surprised they made Goosebumps games, considering that, I actually did not think that they still made Goosebumps games. And even I thought it was really weird that they actually would develop Goosebumps games themselves. Now, obviously, I've talked about Game Mill on this channel a couple times in my reviews on the Rudolph game and the recent Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny, which I gotta say, when it comes to their games, most of them are either really good or kind of misbags. But in the case of the Looney Tunes Sport game and Nicktoons and Dice of Destiny, those are probably the only two games I thought Game Mill actually did pretty well. But considering that they haven't really made a lot of good games as of late, especially with the other previous Nickelodeon games, and obviously the Rudolph game, which I thought was kind of decent. But in terms of Goosebumps, Goosebumps actually was a game I was really surprised they actually started making a game. And this game kind of interested me a little bit, especially when back in the day I used to read all the Goosebumps books and used to watch the TV show. So honestly, this game really kind of got me into wanting to play it. And since it was Halloween, I figured why not we could try this game out by actually just reviewing a Goosebumps game. They've also made other Goosebumps games, but I actually have not played the other games. I will eventually get around to play those kind of games, but I figure since I might as well just make a review on a Goosebumps game since it's Halloween, I figured Terror in Little Creek, since it's pretty recent, I thought I would check this game out. To be honest with you, when it comes to this game, I actually spent a good, I want to say about at least one sitting on this game. And for what I played this game, I actually think it's actually pretty good. Now, in terms of this game, it's pretty much a point-and-click game where you basically go around, you basically solve puzzles. It's more like a point-and-click mystery kind of game. And the way you kind of do around this game, I think, is actually pretty good. It does remind me a little bit like other puzzle-like games, which is kind of cool. Not obviously, Detective Pikachu or Professor Layton kind of gameplay, obviously, but it's still a game that you could just go around and you can just kind of solve puzzles. You sneak around, and obviously it's kind of more of a mystery kind of game, which is kind of cool. In a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit like the old school Scooby-Doo games, which is kind of cool. But except it's Goosebumps instead of Scooby-Doo. But honestly, when it comes to this game, I think it's actually pretty good. I think for most of the game, from Mika just going around and doing all the puzzle, I think it's kind of great. And even though the story, which I'm not going to really spoil too much of the story, since obviously there's a lot of Goosebumps fans that probably want to play this game, but the whole kind of short version of it is that there's actually stuff that's going on throughout the actual town. There's a curfew, and you have all these kids that basically go around and they have to kind of explore and solve a mystery to what's going on with the town and why there's a curfew. And there's a lot of hidden stuff that happens throughout the story, which actually has a pretty interesting cliffhanger, which I'm not going to really spoil. However, in terms of the story, I think it's actually quite decent for the most part, and it's actually pretty straightforward. Now, in terms of the gameplay, like I mentioned, it's obviously a point-and-click game where you're just going around, basically solve puzzles, you sneak around, and you just kind of go through different hidden areas. And most of the time, a lot of the hidden areas, there's a lot of hidden objectives. You basically kind of just go and find them all, and as you're going around, I think overall it's actually pretty good. The only problems I have with this game, most of it obviously had to do with the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the voice acting. I mean, for some people that actually played this game, which I've seen reviews of this game, and some people think that the voice acting is pretty tolerable. I'm going to be honest, I didn't think it was really that tolerable. I actually was quite really cringed through the entire time I actually listened to voice acting. And yeah, sure, I mean, obviously, you can tell they're trying to put a lot of effort into the voice acting. But for some reason, for this kind of game, I feel like the voice acting could have been a little bit better. And definitely with the cringy dialogue, I think they could have done a little bit better with that as well. But I think in terms of everything, I mean, even though the story is kind of straightforward, and obviously it's not something to write home about, obviously, but at least with that, at least it has an interesting setup. But in terms of the voice acting, I'm not really crazy about it, and I think they could have done better. Which is saying something, since Game Mill did not start out doing voice acting in their games, most especially with All-Star Brawl, where they basically removed voice acting entirely. But they got better and better as they got on later on as they were developing licensed games. But I feel like with this game, they could have done so much better with the voice acting, and I definitely think it could have been a lot better. In terms of the gameplay, I think the gameplay is pretty good. The only thing I could say about the gameplay itself is probably the graphics. The graphics, in my opinion, are probably one of the biggest grabs I have with this game. I mean, to be honest with you, since obviously it is a Game Mill game, and I do know that Game Mill doesn't exactly have the biggest track record of making really nice-looking games, when they pretty much make a lot of games that look like a PS2 game, which I understand that, but in terms of this game, I think they could have done a little bit better with it, and especially when, they definitely had like a little bit better with their budgets. I mean, you could tell from like Nicktoons to Dice of Destiny, at least with that game, it tried to be a little bit more like it fits with the theme where it's an MMO kind of game, it's an RPG. But for some reason, like this game, even though it is a point and click game, I completely understand why the graphics are the way they are. But it's like, I feel like every single time they make a game, it doesn't seem like they put any effort into their graphics. So that's kind of the one thing I didn't really like about it, is mainly the graphic. Yet, despite the gameplay, what do I think about the combat system about this game? Well, in this game, you pretty much have a combat system that, besides sneaking around and solving puzzles, you pretty much have a slingshot that you can just go around. You can shoot different things. You can shoot at signs. You can shoot at different hidden objectives to go around and finish up the rest of the level. But in this game, you also could use it against enemies, which I'm going to be honest with you, the way you kind of aim your slingshot, I think is actually pretty bad. And to be quite honest with you, I think they could have done so much better with it. Because for some reason, every time you hit an enemy, it feels like it just stuns them and it doesn't really do much damage. I think for some reason they could have actually done at least somewhat better with it, because I feel like the combat system, in my opinion, was really lackluster. And to be honest with you, for a game like this, I think they could have done way better than what it should have been. Because I think the combat system could have been more enjoyable if they actually put a lot of effort into it. I mean, the enemies, with the way the references with all of the Goosebumps characters, I think it's kind of cool, and most of the monsters look like they're from the actual books. I think they're cool. It's just I wish the combat system could be so much better in the way that you can actually have fun with your slingshot. And even slingshot itself, I think, is actually really cool in of itself. Like, you can go around and shoot things with it. But still, they could have done so much better with it by actually making it more fun to play. But for some reason, they did. Speaking of which, another thing I also didn't like about the game was the fact that when you go around an area, that pretty much the areas are all not that really expanded. And if anything, they could have done so much better with making the areas a little bit more wide, a little more expanded. Because I feel like it's so crammed, and a lot of the times when you go back to look for a different objective, it doesn't feel like you can literally go back to the area that you want. And even though the doors are pretty easy to open and everything, but for some reason, like, the actual areas, they don't seem like it's really easy to get back into, and you just don't get to go back and find the objective that you're looking for. To me, it's kind of a pain in the ass, but the way I look at how this game is, even though I understand it is pretty much a licensed game, and obviously it's kind of like a Rush licensed game, of course, but still, I think they could have done so much better with making the areas a little bit more wide. Besides all the negative stuff I've said about this game, I think the references that they added for all the Goosebumps characters in this game, I think is actually pretty cool. I think most Goosebumps fans are going to really enjoy this game with a lot of the references, because there's a lot of them in this game that are hidden all around this game. And honestly, I think it was kind of nice to see, especially for the fact that it is Goosebumps. Like I mentioned about the puzzles earlier, I think the puzzles are actually pretty good in this game. Obviously, they're pretty easy to beat and they're really basic, but it's also the kind of puzzles that don't bang you over the head with like how difficult they are. They're actually pretty easy, and to be honest, it was actually kind of a joy to try all the puzzles. I think overall the puzzles are pretty good. Overall, I think Terror in Little Creek is actually a pretty good Goosebumps game. I think it could be a lot better in a lot of areas, especially with the cringy dialogue, and of course with the whole expanded areas, and obviously the whole thing entirely. I think the game could have been so much better. But honestly, in terms of the whole game, I think the game is fine. It's definitely a decent Goosebumps game that I think all Goosebumps fans will really enjoy. And it is something that maybe kids could try out, especially if they're trying to find a game to play during the Halloween. Or perhaps they're just getting into Goosebumps or reading the books. I think this could be a great game for them. I think overall this game is fine. It definitely could be better, but honestly I think the game is okay for the most part. And honestly, the game is pretty short, so I think for this people that want to try to get into this game, I would probably say that you could pretty much beat this game in one sitting. That's kind of what happened with me. I basically beat the game in one sitting. But for those, I definitely recommend anybody to try this game out. And honestly, I think this game is fine for anybody who's really the Goosebumps. This is a great game for them. So anyway, guys, that's my review on the game. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.